Dun, dun, dun. Those of you that are already here, my name's Jess Pettitt, and we'll get started right at the top of the hour. It's always good to wait a couple of minutes. I am a triple Virgo, so I'm always very excited when people are early, but I recognize that not everyone can pull that off. But we have such great panelists today. I want to make sure that we start right at the top of the hour and get to as much as we can. People may be joining at a different time, and that is totally fine, but we're going to get rolling and we're recording. So first, again, my name is Jess Pettitt. I am a diversity-related consultant who's been working with the USBG for 500 years, and it is by far one of my favorite clients as a consultant. And one of the things that I have heard over the years is the side hustle yearning for so many of the USBG members to build their own consultancy, start a side hustle, what's the difference, etc. So we pulled together an amazing panel, and I'm going to shut up because they're geniuses. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons, what to do, what not to do, share some tools specific to this kind of big umbrella term that could be a side hustle, could be a consultancy. And our panelists will explain their own background, their own history, and what they are doing. So to kick us off, we're going to start with LaShan. I'd like you to introduce yourself to everyone, but also share your biggest mistake.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon. I am LaShan Arceneaux. I am the Queen Sugar at 3 Lumps of Sugar. I am a serial entrepreneur. I've been in some business or another since I was 10 years old. So I have lots of pitfalls and lots of things I've learned. The biggest thing I've learned is all money ain't good money. There was a time, early in my business where, I took every job, I took every gig because I wanted to make money. But what I learned is that every customer is not aligned with what I'm doing. And sometimes you just end up not being a match. And so I kind of look at it up front. In that intro call that I do with everyone, I try to do like a little matchmaking thing. Like, are we aligned? Are they a little high strung? Am I a little high strung? Is there going to be a match between us? Can we work together? And I take that forward.
Excellent. Excellent. Not all money's good money. Thank you very much, LaShan. And let's toss it over to Zach. What are your thoughts?
Hello, everyone. I'm Zach O'Hare, industry professional for over 25 years, been full-time consultant for about the past 8 years. And I will say there's a lot of mistakes that I've made, a lot of things I've learned over that time. But I'd say a huge one is keeping great records, not just for yourself, but for your clients, and being able to reference these things at all times. Sometimes there's a email that might get lost, or a receipt that might get lost. Just be wary of that, and get yourself a good accountant too.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Zach. Go ahead. You were still going.
Yeah, I was just want to pass it on to Kim.
Oh, great. Kim, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kim Haasarud. Been involved with the USBG for a very long time, but I am a consultant. So I've been a consultant for 25 years called Liquid Architecture. So I've done everything from, I started off doing like big events, and now kind of consult with a lot of restaurant groups, bars, hotels, mostly national, but some international projects. Yeah, and I do a lot of like drink development and help put together beverage menus and training. So one of the biggest pitfalls, and there are many of them, mistakes, would be, and I'll probably go in a little more detail about this, is about net payment terms. As a consultant, you also have to kind of front a lot of your own expenses, and really being aware of expenses that you have to put out versus what's coming in. And so really being aligned with money flow and net payment terms, biggest mistake is like being, you know, having to front a lot of things up front and not being prepared for that.
Excellent. And I think, Kim, that kind of shouts back to what Zach was talking about of like good record keeping and things like that. And even LaShan, not all money's good money. For those of you that are relatively new at this, it took me years to do this. And so when I hear gross payment versus net payment, sometimes you still have to do that little dance of like, which one is which? And so this is my totally dumb way of remembering it. And that gross is a gross because none of the taxes have been taken out yet. So it's a lie. It's gross payment is a lie. And net payment, all that's left. Everything's been taken out. All that's left are the little teeny tiny strings barely holding your life together. That's net payment. That's how I think of it. So with that, let's go to LaShan. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way. So you volunteered to talk about some pitfalls, right? And then we'll kind of build up from there. So hit it.
So, I'm going to go right back to what you were just talking about. One of the pitfalls early in my business, I had this great deal with a national retailer. And then they sent me their terms and their net terms were going to be net 30. And that's when I figured out that I would have to get all the products shipped to me, make it, ship it to them, and then wait 30 days to get paid. And then I thought, well, who has $100,000 laying around to do that type of stuff? And that's when I decided I'm going to keep my day job. So I decided to work on my work-life balance, meaning I had a full-time job. I was doing this as a consultant, and then I was trying to have a life, but not really. But those are the things you have to consider, right? Income is not guaranteed when you're a consultant. So you want to look at, can you stay with your current job while you're building your business? And then finally, when I settled in and realized I wasn't ready, I decided to get ready. And so what I did for myself was worked out a plan. And the plan could be different for different people. But the plan I had was that I was going to wait until I had 6 months worth of all my expenses, plus a little extra before I left my job. And that extra included COBRA coverage because you also have benefits most of the time when you're self-employed. And so what I wanted to make sure of is that I could cover my COBRA benefits for the year. As someone who's diabetic, I'm on insulin pump and all those types of things. And so I literally cannot live without those things, but also wanted to be self-employed. So those are the things you have to take into consideration. How easy is it going to be on your own, not knowing when you're going to get that next paycheck, right? When you don't have a customer that doesn't pay their invoice on time, because that will also happen. And so you really have to get real with yourself about your money, your bills, what you owe, because the mortgage company and the utilities, they don't care. They want their money. They don't care what you got going on. You cannot say my client didn't pay their invoice, so I can't pay you. They'll say your client didn't pay their invoice and now you're in trouble. So that is the biggest thing, for me. And speaking of clients, you're responsible for business development, and not just business development, but client retention. There's not customers just walking down the street going, hey, what do you do? Can I give you money? No, I have to go out and seek out those clients most of the time. Now, there are referrals and things of that nature, but you have really got to be able to find some clients that align with you, that are going to pay money for the thing that you do, whatever that is. If it's cocktail development, if it's, point of sale stuff, if it's promotional items, you've got to find those clients. And then finding them is easy. Retention is hard. Keeping those clients year after year to guarantee yourself some type of steady income is a thing that you really have to work on. And that leads right into time management. You are the chief bottle washer. You're responsible for marketing and sales and packing and shipping and product development and all the things. And so it really becomes a time management issue, especially if you're still working that job, right? Because there's only so many hours in a day. I wish the day had, 50 hours, but then we'd be really, really, really tired. But, on a given day, I would work an 8 to 9 hour job and be someone's mom and try to work this business while my daughter was sleeping, meaning that I didn't get much sleep, But those are the things you have to take into consideration. You know, I had to get honest with myself. Is this a business or is this a hobby? If it's a hobby, that's still great. You know, it's something I'm going to do to get a little extra money here and there. But if it's something I'm going to use to pay my day-to-day bills, I had to get really honest with myself and figure out if I had the time to do it and carve out what that time was, and then be honest with myself, right? You know, I can't be watching, you know, Survivor and Amazing Race because I have work to do. And so you just have to get honest with yourself, especially in the beginning, that time is limited and you probably won't be able to do everything all at once. You know, delegation, you know, I try to do everything. I still try to do everything because I feel like no one knows my business like I know my business. But, you know, I started using, you know, back then Fiverr, and now I'm using a lot of Upworks, you know, for tasks that I can delegate. You know, sometimes there's a flyer that needs to be created. There's some marketing things that I need. And I realize I can really delegate those things to someone else. And I've been really good about keeping 2 to 3 consistent people that I'm working with over and over again. So they begin to know my business. And I do that in place of having employees, right? I've got some independent contractors that work per event with me. And that's the way to go. You know, early on, I was like, oh, I'm going to be an employer, and I wasn't ready to be an employer. You know, things are easier now. You know, even through Square, you can onboard an employee and they take care of the tax documents and making sure that they get paid and everything's deducted properly. But in the beginning, that was a big pitfall for me because I didn't know how to do it and I didn't have an accountant and I messed up. And you never want to mess up when it comes to the IRS because they will find you and they will make it very, very, very painful. And so that is a pitfall that you definitely want to avoid. And so I'm going to go ahead and pitch it to Zach. And then if we have questions at the end, I'm going to answer anything you want to know.
Thank you, LaShan. So I offered myself up to talk about running a consultancy, which obviously is going to vary depending on what it is that you're consulting on. And I think that before even getting into running a consultancy, it's a good question to ask yourself, what is it that I'm consulting on? I myself, for example, consult in the hospitality industry, but that means a great many things. And I have clients who are boutique restaurants. I have clients who are national restaurants or national brands. I have, you know, done a lot of festival work in the past where there are production companies that are doing events. So in some regards, what I consult on is full spectrum hospitality. However, that means a lot of different things depending on the client. Now, when I first got into it, I thought that I was going to be doing more menu consultation and I would be, you know, helping to develop food and beverage programs, and that would be the end of it. But it's grown a lot, and depending on the client's needs, I do all sorts of things, design aspects sometimes. You know, whether that is in the branding for people, or whether it's in bar or kitchen design and having to draw up full MEP plans for people, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing if you are not aware. So all sorts of things that, you know, you might not necessarily think you're getting into, but sometimes it happens just as a natural flow of things. It was a means to growing my business, when, of course, I was hoping to do just the more artistic parts of it, but that doesn't really pay the bills. So what is it you're consulting on? Now, like LaShan mentioned, you could be doing this as just a side hustle. So in some cases, as a bartender, maybe you just want to make creative cocktails for people. You can consult on that. Absolutely. You could consult specifically just on beverage or just on cocktails, or, you know, spirits portfolios, or all sorts of things. But, you know, you end up limiting yourself, which means that you also end up limiting the possibility of funds coming your way, of projects coming your way. So just be mindful of that. How much consulting work do you want to do? Do you want this to be your full-time gig, or are you really just trying to do a certain aspect of something that you like and focus on that and make a little money on the side? So it's not necessarily better to focus on one thing or multiple things. As I'm sure we all know, if you focus on one thing, you can get very good at it with that hyper focus. However, if you are doing multiple things, you need to do your due diligence and really study in all of those areas, because if you think you're getting involved in beverage and your background is spirits, or maybe you're comfortable with beer, or whatever the case may be, you might need to know all those sorts of things. And once you develop a beer menu for someone, you need to know how all the draft systems work. You need to know how to troubleshoot those things, because as soon as you make a client, they're going to start calling you for answers to these sorts of questions. And you don't always need to know every answer, but you do need to know where to go to get the answer, even if it's just a recommendation to your client of, hey, I've got this, great group that I work with, and they can facilitate all your needs for any sort of technical piece to this. So having some of those things in your tool belt is really, really important. And speaking of tools, what sort of tools do you need? That's going to depend on what you're consulting on, of course. So uh, think about that. If you are consulting on something like design or branding, maybe tools to do design work are super important, right? But if you're mostly creating beverage menus and you're not focused on design, or if you're working in the kitchen and all you do is create food and training programs for cooks to produce the food, then you probably won't have any use for things like Adobe Illustrator or InDesign. But that doesn't mean that you won't have use for things like Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, very universal tools that exist not just for those doing admin work, but for those who are professionals in what they do, regardless of what the industry is. I mean, if you don't have a way to put together some sort of documents for someone, then you're not going to be able to garner the business and or keep the business. So I think that at least in hospitality, Microsoft Excel and learning Microsoft Excel in and out is super important. Obviously, Word is fine as well, but there could be a multitude of different tools that you might need. What about your invoicing systems, or how you're keeping track of your expenses? There's QuickBooks. There's a lot of different things online. I wouldn't say that one necessarily is better than the other. It's really more about how you learn to use the tools. There are people who make great use out of things I would never ever use. And then there are things that I use that other people are like, why do you use that? Well, I'm comfortable with it, or it makes sense to me, or there is something that I do that is a function of that tool that I can't get somewhere else. So just think about the tools that you need and be open to learning new tools. Try them out, test them. There's always going to be a learning curve, but if it doesn't work for you, that's okay too. You can obviously use what's tried and true to you, but don't be afraid to take a look at things. I think that also in culinary, things change all the time. And so for, a bartender or a chef, if you're not willing to try out the new torches, new smoking guns, new ice cutting saw or something, like, you could be doing yourself a disservice. People are going to ask about these sorts of things all the time, and things are changing. So if you're not keeping track of these kinds of things, when flavor blasters became a hot new tool, and people are asking, oh, have you seen this? And you're still stuck on a smoking gun, you have the potential to lose some business. So just keep your eyes out there and focus on some of the tools that are out there as well. So you've decided on what you want to do. You've decided on the tools that you need to do it. What about the space to do it in? You need a space to work in, and yes, you can work in a home office, and that's great in a lot of cases. It depends on whether most of your client work is on site with them, or whether you have situations where you need to bring clients in. I've had to do meetings and presentations in my own space, and I have the way I have set things up a few times in the past is I have done things. I think LaShan and I talked about this earlier, some co-working spaces, and that can be great. I also, I'm fortunate I have a space where the floor plan in my house is kind of split, and the whole front portion of it looks like a front bar, and I can host and do all of these things, and my living space is kind of separate. I have, rented out spaces before to do things, and that's also a possibility. Maybe you only need to host or take meetings or presentations for big clients once in a blue moon. You could rent an Airbnb for something like that and set it up as a whole experience. But whatever it is, make sure that it works for you, it works within your budget, it works within your means, and that it doesn't take a lot of work for you to do the work. So make sure that it is comfortable for you to use and do what you need to as you need to on a pretty regular basis. Otherwise, it's going to become too much of a challenge. So other than that, you figured out what you want to do, the tools, the space. Now, how do you get that business? Well, hopefully, if you're going into something that you already have a pretty good understanding in, you've already started to build a portfolio. You've kept track of the things that you do. You have photos and videos. And if you are thinking about consulting and you don't have any of these things, start now. Take photos of everything, take videos of everything, any sort of documents that you have. Like I have tons and tons and tons of bar and kitchen drawings, and all of these things I have available. So if a client wants to know, oh, have you ever done anything like this? Or, oh, can I see some work like this? Yeah, absolutely. I have tons of it. So having that portfolio is great. And then taking the best of that portfolio and putting it out there for the world to see, whether you're building yourself a website, whether you are putting most things on social media. And if you are on social media, make sure that you are, of course, posting often. Make sure that you get a good following on there. These are things that clients will be looking at. And for those wondering, I myself am not a social media warrior. I am rather old school in a lot of my approach. I have garnered a lot of my clients through the work that I do and the connections that I've made. And I don't I don't do the route of social media, although it is incredibly popular and it works very well for a lot of people. But regardless of whether or not I'm posting on social media, I do need content for clients, and in a number of different ways, whether it is just to show them some of the body of work that I've done, or whether it's actually pulling things for a specific proposal. So uh, other tools that you might need is something to make proposals with, to make contracts with. You need to do a lot of due diligence in finding out contracts and how to write contracts, how to write proposals, and making sure that those things are mindful of what the client is looking for, but also carves out some very clear expectations for you and your client between each other and how you will work together. And those include, timelines of your producibles, what it is that you're going to actually create for them or give to them, or any sort of deliverable that they're going to ask for. It needs to be pretty cut and dry as to when and how that will be delivered. And then, of course, payment. How does that work? LaShan already talked about, clients having certain expectations on what payment looks like, whether that's net 30 or net 60, or some clients even have a net 180, if you can believe that. So if you are looking for, to garner business with larger clients. Maybe you're looking to do brand work. I mentioned this because a lot of brands that are out there, a lot of brand portfolios are looking for people, do look for people, and do offer work often. But you need to know what that looks like with them, because a lot of them do not pay immediately upon receipt, net 30. There's a lot of brands out there, and it's because they do a ton of work and they have a lot of people working for them, that it might be 3 months or 6 months on payment. So you get all of that together, have that contract with them, review those terms, submit your invoice, and do it immediately and be ready to wait for that check. But staying organized and on top of it, super important. So whether you're using Dropbox or Google Drive or something, make sure that you're backing up any sort of files that you have, any of these contracts that you have, so you can reference these things. Super duper important. And it's also a great place to store things that you're working on, or maybe you don't know that you need yet, whether it's training materials or presentations, things for the future. And be sure to build all that kind of content as well. If a client asks you to create a wine program for them, just arbitrarily saying a wine program, make sure that you have training materials for all sorts of questions and all sorts of situations. Is this a high-end restaurant? Great. Do you need to get esoteric with some of your training materials? Maybe. But just because you do high-end wine doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need to cover the basics and the foundation of things. Maybe you end up in a market with a client that isn't as advanced, or maybe they're super advanced. You don't necessarily know. If you end up working not just on a local level, but on a national level, you will find that different outlets with the same brand are still very different. Even if they're trying to streamline things, you go to, a market like Huntsville, Alabama, and then you have Nashville, who's less than an hour away. Be like, oh, those are still two totally different markets. And you know, you could be working with a client in Nashville, but then the expectations are different in Los Angeles. And maybe they have concepts on both coasts. I've experienced a lot of that working with hotels where things are very, very different. So make sure that you are able to create materials that are tailorable to different situations, even for the same client.
Yeah, Zach, I appreciate you kind of doing a whole arc, right? And so some of the questions that are coming in on the chat, I want to make sure that we get to them as well. And I want to make sure that Kim gets to kind of talk, because she's doing a lot around. The first question that came in on chat is if someone is new wanting to get into consulting, where should they start? And so I'm going to interrupt you, Zach. I'm going to put a pin in you because I also have questions to follow up with LaShan and Zach. It's coming. But before we get there, sit on the edge of your seats. Because Kim, what I think you wanted to talk about was really the timing, the starting pieces, right? So both LaShan, you may have scared everyone. They're like, I'm out. I got a full-time job. What's Cobra? P.S. You can ask your HR person, if you have a job with insurance, how much does Cobra cost? And then you have that number bonus, right? And then Zach, you may have scared people in that, like, there is a lot of stuff happening, right? And there is a lot of stuff happening. And spoiler alert, I've been doing my consultancy for 20 years. Those pitfalls and all of those things, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? But it's better than sitting in a cubicle, or at least for me, and I'm feral and have no monetizable skills. So I want to, if it's possible, I want to flip to Kim really quick and kind of do some of those pieces that you were talking around marketing, growing the business. Like those are all lessons we need to remember no matter how long we've been doing this. And then I'm going to circle back around with some questions. And that does remind me, because people are watching the recording, you can also text message questions at 202-670-4262. If you're watching the recording, it makes this evergreen. And that'll come directly to me. And if it's a question directed to one of our panelists, I'm happy to email connect the two of you, or I'll do my best to answer it. You can also put questions and things like that into the chat. I'll try to monitor both. I have unmedicated ADHD, so that usually goes pretty well. So, Zach, before you scare everybody into like, oh my God, let's back up into kind of getting it started, getting it growing, because it's a good reminder for us too. And then, LaShan, I'm coming for you. I have a follow-up question, and then Zach, you'll be back. Go ahead, Kim.
All right, hi. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the side hustle and actually staying in that side hustle, because that's how everybody really starts before they, you don't go into, no one ever goes into, after high school, I want to be a consultant. No, you work, and then business starts to kind of get thrown your way. And then it's kind of, when do you start to make that transition from, my bartending and from side hustle to being a consultant. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the side hustle and actually the benefits of what you should do while you're in that side hustle to kind of get ready for the business. And staying in that side hustle is kind of not a bad thing. Don't be anxious to like, I need to get out of this and I need to start a business. I know people that have been in the side hustle for decades and they love it. It allows them a lot more flexibility. They can do a lot of different things. They can also kind of make mistakes and maybe it not be too consequential, keep their options open, explore other careers in beverage. So there's a lot of really great benefits in staying in that side hustle. You can kind of get a sense of what you are really good at and what you're not so good at, right? So and that all kind of starts to fine tune of what your services are going to be and what that can kind of look like, what your payment structure is going to be. So you can start to kind of like little by little build on that until you're ready to kind of make that leap. So some things that you can do in the side hustle is, really kind of get a sense of, like I was saying, what you're really good at. What you want to do when you do make that leap is you want to have like a really good capabilities deck. So if someone sees your cocktails and they want to be able to do that, or they want to hire you to do that, you want to be like, oh, hey, here you go. Here's all my capabilities of what I can do. So you want to start kind of working on building your capabilities deck. And that is just kind of a list of services that you provide along with examples of that work that you've done. So like Zach was saying too, when you're doing these events, try to record, take pictures. Those are going to become really, really valuable. Other things that you can start to do is start to kind of build the beginnings of a website, where you can list your services, where you can list some examples of events that you've done or cocktails that you've created. Maybe you can even start to collect testimonials from clients that you can use. So all of these things are, you can kind of do in this side hustle. And you also can do such a great networking opportunity, especially if you are a bartender. I mean, you have a world of people at your fingertips, right? I'm going to be doing an event execution seminar next week, and I'm doing this seminar with a gal who is still a bartender. She works at a great bar here locally, and she has a cocktail kind of catering, but all of her business comes from her customers that want to hire her. And it's just, she doesn't want to leave actually her bartending yet because it's such a great networking opportunity. So really kind of like, before you feel like you have to take the leap, kind of really make sure that you are really set up financially. You have a good networking group. Social media, if that's something you're good at, you definitely want to be posting on that and kind of get that all set up. You can also start to get kind of your business set up, your LLC, which you also should do as a side hustle too. Initially brands, you just, maybe they're paying you just with your name as a check, which is fine in the beginning. But eventually you probably want to open up an LLC just to protect you a little bit more, especially because we're in the liquor alcohol industry. You want to kind of create a shell around you so you have a little bit more protection that way. So some specific, I kind of made a list of tools that you want to, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with these tools, but tools that I found extremely helpful for me. When you're building a website, they're I use Wix, and Wix is amazing. It is very user friendly, and you can build a website in minutes. Very, very easy. Excel and budgeting tools. As a consultant, you definitely need to know how to put a budget together. And Excel is what I use. But if you don't know Excel and you want to be a consultant, I would say definitely learn some tools. Lots of great YouTube. There are YouTube videos on everything now. You can become well versed in Excel and QuickBooks by watching a few YouTube videos. So don't be afraid of those things. And one of my most personal favorite tools, I am addicted to this tool, is Canva. I do everything on Canva. I can create flyers. I can create my capabilities deck. I can create proposals, estimates, invoices. I do everything on there, and it is so incredibly user friendly. You don't have to be a graphic designer. It is great. It's definitely a tool well worth it. You can also create all your social media posts on that too. Yeah, so I think kind of once you've kind of sort of worked all of those things out, and you've talked to other consultants, and you've seen what's out there, and now you kind of have, like, you built sort of this analysis too. You kind of know what's out there. You know what the market can hold as far as pricing and rating structure. And that's as far as kind of rates and how much you should charge. That's also a big question that I get asked too. And one thing to consider is, someone is hiring you because of your expertise and because of your level of experience. So if you've only been doing this for a few years, you may not know enough to, like, build in a lot of contingency plans or really understand the pros and the cons of things. So to kind of be aware of and in tune with, like, how much experience you have. But I always tell bartenders, maybe kind of starting off with, if you are literally are just now getting asked from, like, brands of what to charge, what I tell bartenders is, like, maybe take the top 10 days of bartending that you've ever had, not the extreme ones, but like average really, really good days, average that out. And that might be a good day rate to start with. You don't want to sacrifice, you don't want to price yourself too low. Otherwise, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So kind of take some really good days of bartending, and that can kind of start off as your day rate.
Kim, can I ask you a follow-up question? Is that possible?
Sure.
I don't want to mess up your flow.
No.
Well, a couple of questions have come in the chat, and I think that you're heading there. So I want to make sure that you get these two buzzwords, but I think that you also, I'm really curious what your perspective is. So the first one is, and we'll talk to LaShan in a second about kind of interviewing both ways when you get a proposal in. LaShan, spoiler alert, that's the question I'm going to ask you. But there's also, how do you do market research? So even when Zach mentioned Birmingham and Nashville, what if you live in DC and you don't know nothing about Nashville or Birmingham? Kim, can you talk a little bit about the market research of what you don't know? And then to contrast that, because of course I'm asking a double-barreled complex question. That's what you pay me for. Yolanda is in Charlotte and is talking about how there's a lot of consultants in Charlotte. And so how do you differentiate yourself in a market that's you're very familiar with, right? Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you do that, either through marketing or experience or differentiation or whatever? Go for it.
Sure. And I think I'm probably a little bit different because my consultancy is like more kind of national and like some chains. But even in that world, like we all know who each other are. We all know, the consultants all know who we are, and we often will kind of talk about what we're charging and rates and so forth. So I would say it's kind of talking with those other consultants. And initially that might seem like, ooh, they're my competitor now. But when you work together, you can often get more work out of it. So I find that just talking to other consultants is a great way to kind of feel them out for kind of what the market is. And when prices go up too, right? When you need to be charging more, or when maybe there's too many consultants and you've priced yourself out. Maybe you kind of need to come down and like figure out a way to streamline your business a little bit more so that you can charge accordingly and be more competitive. So I think it's as far as kind of figuring that out, it is about just networking and talking to those people and seeing if they'll kind of reveal how much how much they charge and how they go about it. And that way you can kind of continue to fine tune, because it is always a fine tuning process for me. You know, every client is very different. And the hardest thing for me is actually scoping out a project, right? And sometimes I get caught, I call it like scoping hell, because the scope continues to evolve and change. And you know, what's important to one client may not be that important to another client. You kind of need to start off as like, okay, here's kind of a base. And this really comes from experience. It comes from experience of, oh, you know, I'm not going to do that again. Or, you know, yeah, I mean, it is a constant like changing and scoping and trying to figure out kind of where that is. But you do need to kind of start with the base of what you're going to charge, and then you're kind of adding and adapting to that. You know, for example, when I get called to do a project and, you know, I have to build in like travel expenses, or, you know, if I have a client that is very needs a lot of my time, I have to, you know, think about building in that time of even kind of the creative process. So it is a difficult thing, and it's not that black and white. I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear.
No,
but
actually, Kim, I think it's really important, because I think they're actually connected, right? Is that there's a term that I really like of cooperation,
Mhm.
and that is that your competition are the only people who understand the weird job you have when you have a side hustle or a consultancy. So dive into that network, one, for referrals, or you can help somebody out. You can help them scope it. Like when Zach was talking about kind of saving everything in Dropbox, where do you think my Dropbox files started? They were my colleagues, my cooperation, right? And so then I can either do something different and get to be known for like this kind of different approach. But I also like, I don't want to do that job, right? So then I can give it to other people. So the marketing to get business is the same marketing to do market research, and it's the same networking to give and get other work so that you can differentiate yourself. So that's part of the reason I asked you, is that you're such a good networker, and you know people all over everywhere, and it serves you as far as bringing things in, but it also serves you as getting stuff off your plate when you're not the right fit. So I thought that was a good start. Zach, do you have anything to add to Kim's answer about networking, market research,
Yeah, I think
differentiation, cooperation? And then we're going to go to LaShan with the interviewee question.
Yeah, and Jess, I think you made a good point in terms of the networking and working with other people. Kim and I have worked together actually quite a bit on projects, and you know, it's a good idea to build a team of people that you not only trust, but people that work similarly to you, in case you need associates to pass work off to, or you know, to ask questions with. And sometimes they'll feed you work, sometimes you'll feed them work. And it's just it's a great way to work within your community and build not just networks but also other clients. So I'm in full support of that. Now, in terms of market research, I know that was also part of the question, and there's a lot of different ways of doing it. It kind of depends on what it is that you are trying to get market research in. But since we're talking about USBG and most people are probably thinking about the beverage industry, I mean, you really have to utilize a combination of tools, and whether that is, you know, what products are in what places, because it's not always readily available and in the same places. I think starting out and finding out, is the market that you're in a more of an open market, or is it like a control state where things are purchased from a store? What does that mean? Just doing a lot of research on the internet that way is a good place to start, but then reaching out to other people in those markets. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be people that you know. It could be people who are running other restaurants or bars, and you could just say, hey, look, you know, I'm from here and I'm, you know, kind of interested in this market. Is there anything that you could tell me? Lean on the distributors in the area. You can reach out and ask questions of distributors in any market you like, and find out all sorts of things from products that are being carried to what works well to who is carrying what and that may impact your decision on how you go about approaching a project. You can also dive into, there's a lot of market research that's done by the government and other entities. You can look up all sorts of demographics and things on the internet that are provided by, agencies that already do all of this work for you.
That's awesome. Thank you both, Kim and Zach. LaShan, I'm curious if you can speak to a little bit. You mentioned it at the top of kind of like you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, but building off of what Kim was talking about and what Zach just said too, I think it comes back to what you were talking about. That dual interview is also scoping, pricing. Are you the right person? Are you not the right person? Are they the right person? Are they the decider? That whole word cloud. Can you dive into that bucket for us?
Absolutely. The first thing I discuss with them before we even meet face-to-face is budget, right? I know how much money I need to make to pay my bills. And there's some people that have a smaller budget and it's just not worth my time or effort. I have I used to be an accountant, y'all. So I have a whole margin model spreadsheet that I can plug in the numbers and it'll shoot out back for me what I'm making per hour. And if it's not what I need to make, I'm very honest with them. And I just say, at the end of the day, we're both in business to make money. And it's just not something that I'm going to be able to do. I don't refer them to other people because I don't want to pass on headaches to other people, but I'm always very clear up front, what I need to make. And if it's not a match, it's not a match, right? It's like going out on a date with someone you're not attracted to. It doesn't work. So that's the first thing I do. And the second thing I do is I always ask them, is this a project you've had before? Because what I'm trying to ascertain is, did they have this project before and they had a falling out with the previous consultant, and why? And so I would say, hey, was someone doing this project before? Or is this a new project? And so if it's a new project, fine. If it's a project that is ongoing, oh no, were you working with someone else before? What happened? Because people are brutally honest. They will tell you, it didn't work out because of X, Y, and Z. So that's my chance to fight or flight, right? To understand if, are they going to say the same thing about me in 6 months? They'll be saying, she was hard to work with, whatever the case may be. So I utilize that to my advantage. Do their requests match up with my capabilities, right? Sometimes people want you to do everything. I don't do everything. I do the thing that I do because I'm good at the thing that I do. And I don't want to do the thing I'm not good at because that doesn't benefit anybody. So I want to know right up front, like Kim said, I have a capabilities deck. I gave you the capabilities deck that says I do A, B, and C. So if you're looking for D, E, F, or X, Y, Z, I'm not your girl. And I'm very clear about that up front. Again, I'm in business to make money, but I schedule my life and my business in a way that I want to have an enjoyable experience, right? We've all had that client where it's just been a drag, and then you put them on the, I'm never work with that client again list. And so right up front, I've learned these things. In the beginning, I didn't do this. In the beginning, I just took every client, everybody, because I had bills to pay. Now I'm a little more selective, and I ask these questions right up front, to alleviate those headaches down the line. I look at, what's the time constraint on this thing, because now as a consultant, it's different than when you go to work. You go to work, you sit at your desk, you got the 8 hours, you belong to your company. But now I belong to 20 different people. So if I've got deadlines, can I fit this project in with the other clients that I already have that are already paying me, right? I don't take on new clients, that need it done in a week and I'm already busy that week. That's a no. That's a no. In the beginning, I would say literally, I can remember staying up like 48 hours straight trying to get a project done for somebody because I overpromised and I didn't want to under-deliver. So I have learned, don't do that, because being up for 48 hours straight is painful. It's just painful. And so you will learn as you go along what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And then you have to be firm with that. You can't waver on it. In the beginning, I would be like, well, I can make an exception because I got to pay my mortgage. And no, I don't do that now. I'm very clear about what my capabilities are, because you end up burnt out, stressed out, and you have to remember, this is your business. So if you're burnt out, what are you going to do? It's not like you have this 8 to 5 where you're going to get this guaranteed paycheck, or direct deposit every 2 weeks or every month. this is the business that you're using to pay your bill. So if you're burnt out and stressed out and you just don't want to do it anymore, where does that leave you?
Yeah, I think that's key. And Zach, you're up because I see your hand. I just want to name what may sound like a contradiction is welcome to self-employment. And the contradiction is be very, very flexible because every client is different, and hold your boundaries and learn your lessons because they're going to keep trying to teach you until you learn them. So you have to be flexible and rigid at the same time. So Zach, you had a follow-up, and then I'm going to go to Kim
Yeah,
with our
that
closing.
you pretty much nailed it, Jess. Just more about the communication with the client, setting those good expectations, both for you and for them. I mean, LaShan's right. Telling them what you are able and willing to do, super important. But also, some of these people might be losing some of these clients because of their communication, and they aren't setting good expectations with their clients. If they're unavailable and unable to talk or answer emails or phone calls or something, they're traveling, working with someone else, they need to let them know that. A good rule of thumb is you should be answering emails and phone calls within 24 hours unless you've already made it clear that you're unavailable to this client.
Mhm. Yeah. There is a thing in the notes that we're not going to have time to get to, but I'm just going to say it. And then Kim, we're going to go to you for the closing tip. And that is, it's related. You need to be consistently who you say you are while you're also being open to growing and evolving and finding out who you are. Another contradiction of self-employment. But one of the things in the notes is also you got to be Switzerland because you don't know who knows who. And don't say nothing bad about nobody because somebody sitting next to you someday is going to be a client or somebody related to them as a client. Unless, and I'm going to caveat on this because it wasn't in the notes, unless it is who you are and what your brand is. Like I think one of the most positive things that I got feedback, and then again, I'm going to shut up, Kim, you're going to be up for the closing, is I was at a conference recently and a potential client happened to talk to someone else who is a client of mine. And they were telling the potential client was telling my client they really wanted to meet me. And that was like their goal of the conference is they're going to try and get me to be their consultant. And so without knowing they're talking to one of my client's like, oh, well, I'm happy to do an introduction if you like. And the potential client was like, oh, I'm just going to meet her at the bar at night. And my client said, yeah, she don't do nights. She's not going to be at a bar. She's sober and she's pretty agoraphobic. So that's not how you're going to meet her. And if you'd like a one-on-one introduction, she's much more likely to grab breakfast with you if you're interested. And so the potential client eventually found me, we're eating breakfast, and they told me this in this like super kind of, that was the weirdest feedback ever. And it was so complimentary to me that my differentiation, my branding, my who I am also survived who I am as a person. Right. And so it was a great handoff because they were able to expect exactly what they should be expecting from me. And another client vetted me before I even got involved with the potential client. That's taken 20 years to get there, but it's complicated and it's super easy. Another contradiction of self-employment. So, Kim, in the 8 minutes that we have left, can you give us the biggest thing you've learned or a takeaway tip? And then you're going to hand it back to Zach. Zach, you're going to hand it to LaShan. Go, Kim.
I would say don't be afraid to fail or to make mistakes, because that is really the only way. As long as you embrace them and learn from it, you're only going to get better. So learn from your mistakes and know that you're going to make them. That nobody is perfect. Know that you're going to make mistakes, embrace them, and learn from them. Biggest
Great.
tip. Yeah.
It's a good one. Zach, what about you? Closing thoughts, biggest thing you've learned or tips to take away?
Yeah, I'd say we covered it a lot here, but don't say yes to everything. That's huge. There's a combination of things out there that will make you happy and inspired, will teach you, you can grow from it. And then there's things that pay the bills. And you do have to find that balance between them and probably do a little bit of both. One to keep you sane and one to keep a roof over your head.
Yeah, exactly. Another contradiction, yet very
Yeah,
important for
there's
employment.
one other thing I'd say, if you are getting into it, and the concern is, how do I actually make money doing this? The power of perpetuity, of finding clients who need a lot of work, and not just focusing on the immediate, like, oh, there's this event, or oh, they need help with this one thing. Looking for people who you can build a relationship with and work on work that brings more work.
Yeah, absolutely. Work begets work. LaShan, what about you? Biggest thing you've learned or tips, takeaways?
We talked about it earlier, co-working space. I'm currently in a co-working space, have been so for the last 10 years. It's a good way for me to control my budget, right? It's all inclusive. I don't have to worry about cable and internet and water and all those other things, right? So I've got low cost, low commitment. I'm on I can give a 30-day notice and move out if things don't work out. I have great networking opportunity here. Cinco de Mayo is coming up. I put out some Cinco de Mayo cocktail kits this morning right outside of my space. There's about 50 or 60 businesses here. And so I've already sold like 50 cocktail kits because people want to drink something for Cinco de Mayo and play Loteria and do paint and sip. And so that's a bonus for me. And then in this space, I found a CPA and I found all those other, things that I need help with, because there's other solopreneurs here looking to build their businesses as well. So my accountant is right next door. So came in today and dropped off some stuff I needed to finish up. Some paperwork to be on time for my taxes for next quarter. And so, co-working space is the way to go if you're looking for something outside of your house.
Great tips, y'all. So there's a question specifically about, are y'all interested in or able to share your portfolios or your capability decks? And I'm just going to suggest, let's assume the answer is yes. Feel free to email those directly to Tiffany. She's going to pull together an email for everyone who's registered for this webinar with all the tools and templates and links, et cetera, that your heart desires, I think. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to do another call and see if there's any questions or comments. Zach's also blowing up the chat, answering some folks, so make sure you're reading the chat. I don't have any text messages, but if you're watching the recording specifically, make sure you text message 202-670-4262. Tiffany's already pulling together the resources. No doubt about that at all. Last words in case if there's not questions coming in. Kim, let's start with you. Last thoughts and words.
I would say flexibility is really important. When I'm creating a project for a client, sometimes I will email it. I'll also put it on Dropbox, or even my capabilities deck is like a PDF. It's also a website link. So sometimes the way people receive things and the way clients want to receive things are different. So just being really flexible and not just your time, but how you are creating things.
Excellent. Zach, what about you? Did you learn anything today?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much great knowledge here, and I would say that we're all kind of working on the same struggle. We're constantly having questions and looking for answers, and really need to lean on each other, regardless of whether you're just starting or you've been in it for a while.
Excellent. LaShan, parting words and thoughts?
Know the laws for where you live. We can say whatever we want to say, but I'm in Texas. People are in other places, and the laws are the laws. Learn the laws and the rules and regulations where you live so you can stay out of trouble. It's so important.
Staying out of trouble. Good trouble, at least. I would throw in, and Yolanda, I think this may answer the last question you posted too, but don't forget to use the USBG network. Like, link to a chapter near you, a region near you. There's a summit that's happening in Denver at the beginning of June. Use the website, the electronic resources that have been uploaded there. Find other people. So like Yolanda said, I want to be a private bartender. I'm in North Carolina. And then you apologized because I guess North Carolina is a hard place to become a private bartender. So like finding other people who are involved in the USBG, who are private bartenders, they're your best resource because they're going to have that local network. So USBG, I think, is a great resource. Not only does it provide education like this, but this is how we all met too. And then when we meet people, we now have people we can refer out to those kind of ideas. That's how networking works. And I don't know anything that's a more important tool other than keeping your money straight that is utilizing, giving to, and taking from a network of people who are doing this crazy, weird business. Tiffany put the link to the feedback for today's seminar in the chat. Please do that as well. And with that, I say best of luck to everyone in forming, building, growing, shrinking, picking a boundary, challenging a boundary, making a new one, or making a mistake and screwing it up. Welcome to Consultancy 101. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Great job, panelists. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.